Hey guys, this is a bit of a addition sort of part to the part 4. It'll be like part 4.1 or maybe part 4B, but it's tough to mention a few things like most of Yamato's armor and some stuff about the fire rate of the guns. And so this will be like an add-on. So part 4.1 or part 4 part 2, if that makes any sense to you. So as for Yamato's armor as compared to Iowa's, I'll start off by saying that the armor on board on the turrets, the front faces, you can see right here, the front faces of the turrets. Those are the armor plates on board the turrets, which had a thickness of 65 centimeters, or around 26 inches. I would think, yeah, around that much. Were the only plates on board any naval ship ever that couldn't be penetrated completely by any other naval gun, except for I think her own guns could. But if you took the barrel of a Mark 7 16-incher, which was the type of gun that was on board the Iowa, and put it against literally against the turret face and fire the gun, the shell wouldn't completely penetrate the armor. It would always kind of ricochet, you know? Like, it would put a hole in the armor, and if it was in a real battle, it would pretty much take out the turret and probably kill all the crew members, but it wouldn't actually penetrate the armor. And that just goes to show that, Yamato's armor wasn't quite as shit as some people try to make it out to be. It was still very effective and about as powerful, and even more powerful by far than Iowa's. One more reason was that, Iowa wasn't really built for protection. Like, compare the armor belts on board Iowa, which were like 12 inches, compared to the armor belt on board Bismarck, which was 13 inches, even though Iowa carried a heavier main armament, which usually corresponds to how thick the armor belt is. Now just quickly jumping over to the issue of the rate of fire of the guns. Most sources give the rate of fire of the Iowa as being higher by a bit than that of the guns on board Yamato, but that isn't really true because the fire rate of 1.5 rounds per minute given for Yamato is only for the maximum elevation, which means it takes time for the barrels of the guns to go up and then fire and then go back down for reloading. And because at the minimum elevation, the rate of fire for the guns on board Yamato, the main guns of course, is 2 rounds per minute, or a firing cycle of 30 seconds, which is the same for Yamato. Not for Yamato, what am I saying? The same for Iowa. And even then, the rate of fire is hardly relevant in a medium to long range battleship versus battleship battle, because in order to get a decent firing solution, you need to fire your first salvo, then wait for the shells of that first salvo to land and make splashes so you can correct your solution, or else you're gonna have a much lower hit rate. So yeah, rate of fire is only really relevant when we're talking about shore bombardment capability, or anti-aircraft capability, or ground support. Jumping back to armor for a sec, the deck armor that was used on board Yamato, was different from the new Vickers non-cemented armor that was used for the rest of the armored belt and the superstructure and the turrets. It was I think it was a better alloy. It was like a molybdenum alloy, and it was more resistant than the normal new Vickers non-cemented. So that's something. Of course, bludgeon fire isn't too relevant, mostly because hits above 20,000 meters were pretty rare, and hits above 30,000 meters were unheard of, except for the ones scored by Yamato during Samar against White Plains. If you want source for that, check the video right here. So moving on to why, considering how much heavier the shell was and how much of a higher muzzle velocity that the guns had. Why did Yamato's guns have just a bit more penetration than Iowa's? And that was mostly because the designers of the Type 91 shell kind of sacrificed penetration for a much heavier, a much more yeah, I guess heavier bursting charge, and to have a controllable underwater trajectory. And it was designed that way because it was thought that, you know, if a shell were to land just short of a battleship by accident, of an enemy battleship by accident, if it had a somewhat controlled underwater trajectory, it could just keep going in a pretty much, you know, straightforward path and hit the enemy ship below the waterline, pierce through the anti-torpedo armor, and then blow up, you know, and take out a bunch of, you know, important stuff like machinery maybe, and of course add a torpedo and flood the ship. And of course there was the fact that the shells for the main guns of Yamato pretty much had almost twice as much of a bursting charge in terms of weight than all the other battleships that were afloat. Like Bismarck had 18 kilograms, give or take. Io had 18 kilograms, give or take. Yamato had 34. That's like almost twice as much. And of course using a much more volatile, but in turn more powerful material, which was, you know, TNA versus explosive D, or the German explosive. I'm not really sure what that was. I'm not too well versed in Atlantic theater, so I guess secondary armament isn't, you know, all too relevant, but I can still talk about it a little bit. These were, you know, the secondary armament on board Yamato was mixed. It had the originally 12 155mm 6.1-inch guns, which were mounted in triple turrets. There were two on either side of the superstructure, right here and here behind the main guns, and there used to be a pair of wing turrets on either side of the superstructure, like here and here, but they were removed in favor of more AAA, yeah. And of course, he also carried the 24 127mm 5-inch guns for DP purposes. That's DP purpose. That's a dual purpose. No, for dual purpose uses. That makes a bit more sense. Yeah. For Iowa, she just carried around 127mm 5-inch guns. Again, it's for DP, which means both for surface gunnery and for anti-aircraft gunnery. And of course a mix of machine guns, which they both carried, but they're both pretty much irrelevant when talking about two battleships going head to head, because if you're using a machine gun against battleships, you need to seriously reconsider what you're doing. And I believe the 155mm 6.1-inch guns, which were originally on the Murami class before they were refit with 203mm guns, were a pretty decent anti-ship weapon, and more powerful and more effective against ships than the 5-inchers. Oh, and the one last thing about the speed of the Iowa class battleships. Imagine Iowa being a drag racer, which is fast, but only if you're going in a straight line, and Yamato as being more of a drifter, or, you know, a ship that has less speed but has more maneuverability. That's, you know, especially with the really pronounced bulbous bow, which should help reduce drag in the water. I'm kind of rambling, I'm sorry. But yeah, that was my my part 4.1 or part 4 part A or part 4 part 2, which makes no sense on the Iowa versus Yamato series. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I will see you all later. Bye.